When my daughter told me not to come to her wedding, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were soft, careful, the kind people use when they want to hurt you without feeling guilty. Mom, maybe it's better if you don't come. You'll embarrass us. I remember standing in my kitchen, the phone pressed against my ear, staring at a crack in the wall above the sink. That crack had been there for years. I'd always meant to fix it. Somehow, it felt fitting that I never had. I didn't ask her what she meant. I already knew. I was too quiet. Too old-fashioned. Too me. My daughter had grown into a woman who believed presentation mattered more than presence. Appearances more than history. And I was a reminder of a past she was trying to outgrow. I understand, I said. That's what I always said. I hung up the phone and stood there longer than I should have. The kettle behind me began to whistle, sharp and accusing. I turned it off and sat down at the small table where I used to help her with homework, where I packed lunches, where I once braided her hair before school. I had raised her alone after her father died. I worked double shifts, missed birthdays, learned how to stretch meals, learned how to stretch myself. And now, I was being uninvited from her life's biggest moment, not because I had done something wrong, but because I didn't look right. That night, I opened the old cedar closet in my bedroom. Inside were memories wrapped in fabric. Dresses from weddings long past. A coat I bought the year my husband died, the first thing I'd purchased for myself in years. Boxes of shoes I rarely wore. And hanging quietly at the back, a garment bag I hadn't opened in a long time. I hadn't planned to wear it. In truth, I'd forgotten it was even there. I unzipped the bag slowly, like I was afraid it might disappear if I moved too fast. Inside was a dress. Elegant. Structured. Deep midnight blue, with hand-stitched detailing that caught the light even in my dim room. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was powerful. I ran my fingers along the fabric, my chest tightening. I bought that dress years ago, after I sold something very important. Something no one knew I'd ever owned. I never wore it because I was waiting for the right moment. I suppose this was it. The next morning, I received a message from my daughter-in-law-to-be. Please don't make this harder. We want the day to be perfect. Perfect. That word again. Perfection had cost me everything once. I learned long ago that perfection is often just cruelty dressed nicely. I replied with one sentence. I won't embarrass you. I didn't mention that I was coming anyway. The days leading up to the wedding passed slowly. I watched neighbors trim their hedges, water their lawns, go on with lives untouched by rejection. I went to the tailor. I had the dress adjusted just slightly, not to make it younger, but to make it mine. The woman helping me didn't ask where I was wearing it. She didn't need to. She smiled at me in a way that told me she understood something important was coming. The night before the wedding, I sat on my bed and opened an old photo album. There was my daughter at 5, missing 2 front teeth, holding my hand like I was her whole world. I whispered, I never stopped choosing you. Even if she had stopped choosing me. On the morning of the wedding, I dressed slowly. I pinned my hair back the way my mother used to. Simple. Clean. Dignified. I applied just enough makeup to look awake. Not younger, not hidden. When I zipped up the dress, I stood taller without trying. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't small. She looked like someone who knew exactly who she was, and exactly what she'd survived. I picked up my purse. Inside were keys, tissues, and a slim envelope I hadn't opened yet. I didn't know why I'd brought it. I only knew I was supposed to. As I locked my door and stepped outside, the morning sun caught the fabric of my dress, and for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not anger. Not sadness. Something steadier. Something dangerous. Because when a woman stops trying to belong, she starts remembering what she owns. And my daughter had no idea that by trying to keep me out of her wedding, She had invited the truth instead. Walking in where I wasn't wanted. The church parking lot was already full when I arrived. Luxury cars lined the pavement like a display. Polished, expensive, confident. I parked my old sedan at the far edge, beneath a bare maple tree whose leaves had already begun to fall. It felt appropriate. I had spent most of my life on the edges, watching from a distance, learning when to stay quiet. I stepped out of the car and smoothed my dress. For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something clearly for the first time. Once I walked through those doors, there would be no going back to how things were. I entered the church slowly. The sound hit me first. Laughter, soft music, the hum of people who belonged. I saw heads turn. Conversations pause for half a second too long. Eyes linger. Not in admiration. In surprise. I wasn't dressed like someone's forgotten mother. I wasn't wearing beige or apology. I looked deliberate. I felt my daughter before I saw the dress that changed the room. I felt my daughter's eyes on me before she said my name. That sharp intake of breath, the kind that carries panic, not surprise. Mom. Just one word. Tight. Controlled. Like she was afraid the walls might hear us. She reached me near the aisle, her smile still frozen in place for the guests, her fingers digging into my arm just enough to hurt. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. I looked at her carefully. Her makeup was flawless. Her veil perfectly placed. She looked like a bride from a magazine, beautiful, distant, curated. "I came to your wedding," I said calmly. "You didn't say it was cancelled." Her jaw tightened. "I told you not to come like that," she hissed, her eyes flicking to my dress. "People are staring." "Yes," I said softly. "They are." She opened her mouth to say more, then stopped. Because it wasn't just the guests watching. Her future in-laws had turned their full attention toward us. Her mother-in-law's eyes swept over me from head to toe, not with curiosity, but calculation. Her father-in-law leaned closer, whispering something I couldn't hear. Judgment travels fast in rooms like this. My daughter straightened her spine. "Please," she said through her teeth. "Just sit in the back. Don't make a scene." I smiled. The kind of smile women learn when they've been told to disappear their whole lives. "I won't make a scene," I promised. And I meant it. I walked past her. I chose a seat not in the back, but halfway down the aisle. Not front row. Not hidden. Present. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. The ceremony began. Music filled the room. Guests rose. The groom entered, confident and loud in his happiness. He glanced at me briefly, then looked away, as if I were part of the furniture. I didn't mind. I had learned long ago that people ignore what they assume has no power. As my daughter walked down the aisle, I felt something strange. Not pride, not anger, but grief. Not for the wedding. For the years before it. Years where I cooked every meal and ate last. Years where I paid tuition quietly and received criticism loudly. Years where I learned that love, to some people, means usefulness. She reached the altar. The vows were spoken. Promises made with full confidence, like nothing could ever shake them. I listened closely. Because I knew how fragile promises sound when tested. Applause filled the church. Everyone stood. I stood too. At the reception hall, things changed. That's where weddings stop being sacred and start becoming performances. Crystal glasses. Candlelight. White linens. Wealth displayed like proof of worth. I was guided to my table. Not with family, but near the service entrance. It wasn't subtle. I sat down without complaint. Across the room, I saw the groom's mother lean toward my daughter and whisper something. My daughter laughed. The brittle kind. Then she glanced at me. Just once. Not with love. With irritation. Dinner was served. Wine poured. The groom's mother rose to give a toast. She spoke of family, of tradition, of standards. Her eyes flicked toward me mid-sentence. And of course, she said sweetly, we all come from different places. Soft laughter followed. I didn't react. Silence is a powerful thing when used correctly. Then came the moment. My daughter stood. She tapped her glass. The room quieted. I want to thank everyone who helped make today possible, she said. Especially those who taught me what kind of life I wanted, and what kind I didn't. Her eyes found mine. A pause. Some people, she continued smiling, should be grateful just to be invited. A few uncomfortable chuckles. I felt it then, the shift. Not rage. Clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. She wanted to humiliate me. So I stood. Not abruptly. Gracefully. Every head turned. My daughter froze. I just wanted to say one thing, I said calmly. Congratulations. Relief flickered across her face. Then I added, and thank you for reminding me why I taught myself never to beg for a seat at any table. A murmur rippled through the room. I picked up my purse. I'll be leaving now, I said. Enjoy the rest of your evening. As I walked toward the exit, I heard someone whisper, who is she? I smiled, because the answer to that question was about to change everything. When the ground starts to shift. I left before the cake was cut, before the dancing, before the pretending reached its loudest point. Outside, the night air felt cleaner, colder, but honest. I sat in my car for a moment without turning the key, my hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me. Years ago, an insult like that would have hollowed me out. I would have cried the whole drive home, replaying every word, wondering where I went wrong as a mother. But not tonight. Tonight, something inside me had finally gone quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you stop needing approval from people who only love you when you are small. I drove home. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I slept deeply, the kind of sleep you get when a long chapter finally closes. The next morning, my phone was already buzzing. Not from my daughter. From her husband's father. I let it ring. Then again. Then a text appeared. We need to talk. Please call me. I waited until after breakfast. Until my tea was finished. Until my hands were steady, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to be precise. When I finally called, his voice was tight. Good morning, he said. We had some questions after last night. I'm sure you did, I replied gently. There was a pause. Some of our guests mentioned your dress, he said carefully, and your comment. Yes. Well, he continued, there seems to be confusion about certain arrangements. Financial ones. I smiled. Confusion often happens, I said, when people assume without asking. Another pause. Then, cautiously, do you have a role in any of this? I looked out the window at my quiet street. I suppose it depends, I said, on what you believe this is. Silence stretched. I think, he said slowly, we should meet. So did I. We met 2 days later, not at my home, not at theirs. At a small law office downtown. Neutral ground. I arrived early. I always do. They arrived together. My daughter, her husband, and his parents. My daughter wouldn't look at me. Her husband looked irritated. His parents looked worried. We sat. The lawyer entered. A woman with sharp eyes and a voice like steel wrapped in silk. She nodded at me first. Then them. Let's begin, she said. My daughter finally spoke. Mom, she said tightly, why are we here? I folded my hands. Because, I said calmly, you all wanted clarity. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents. Titles. agreements, dates. Her husband frowned. His mother leaned closer. His father's face went pale. "What is this?" he asked. The lawyer answered. "These are ownership records, investment agreements, property liens." My daughter's voice rose. "Mom, what does this mean?" I looked at her. Really looked. Not the bride. Not the daughter I raised. The woman who had decided I was disposable. "It means," I said softly, "that the house you're living in was never fully yours." Her husband slammed his hand on the table. "That's impossible." The lawyer didn't flinch. "It's very possible," she said. "The original capital came from a private investor." She turned to me. "Would you like to explain?" I nodded. "I worked for 32 years, I said. Not loudly. Not impressively. But steadily. I saw recognition flicker in the father-in-law's eyes. "You were a cleaner," he said slowly. "Yes," I replied. "For law firms. For offices. For people who never noticed me." I smiled faintly. I also listened. The room was silent now. I saved. I invested. I learned. I funded things quietly. My daughter shook her head. "No," she whispered. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "And when you needed help years ago, when you wanted a house but couldn't qualify for the full loan, I stepped in." Her husband stood. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying," I interrupted gently, "that I own the controlling interest." The words settled like dust after an explosion. His mother's lips parted. His father looked physically ill. My daughter stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You humiliated me," she said weakly. "On my wedding day." I tilted my head. "No," I said. "You did that yourself." The lawyer closed the folder. "There are options," she said. "But they depend on cooperation." Her husband swallowed hard. "What do you want?" he asked. I stood. "I don't want anything," I said. "I already have peace." I walked toward the door. Behind me, my daughter's voice cracked. "Mom, wait." I stopped. Didn't turn. "I hope," I said quietly, "you remember this feeling the next time you decide who belongs." Then I left. And for the first time in a very long time, they were the ones left wondering. The truth doesn't explode the way people imagine. It doesn't scream. It settles. Like dust after a long storm. Slow, undeniable, and everywhere. By the following week, the wedding photos were still circulating online. Smiles frozen in time. Dresses glowing under lights. No one could tell from the pictures that everything beneath them had already cracked. But cracks have a way of widening. The call came from my daughter first. Not angry. Not sharp. Small. "Mom, can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I finished my tea. Then I said, "Yes." She came alone. No husband. No entourage. She sat across from me at my kitchen table. The same table where she once did homework, where I packed lunches, where I stayed up late worrying about bills she never knew existed. She didn't look like a bride anymore. She looked like a child who had finally realized the world wasn't built to revolve around her. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know," I said. Tears slid down her cheeks. "He told me things," she admitted. "That you were lucky. That you didn't really contribute. That you'd just embarrass us if people knew." I reached across the table and wiped her tears the way I used to when she was little. "I raised you better than that," I said softly. "But I didn't raise you to worship money either." She looked down. "I hurt you." "Yes," I said honestly. "You did." Silence. Then she asked the question she'd been avoiding. "What happens now?" I leaned back in my chair. "Now," I said, "you decide who you want to be without borrowing someone else's cruelty." Her marriage didn't end that day. But something else did. The illusion that power belongs only to those who speak the loudest. A week later, her husband asked to meet. I agreed, in public. At a cafe where everyone could see us, but no one could hear the details. He didn't sit down right away. I was wrong, he said. Yes, I replied. I underestimated you. Yes, I thought. I raised my hand gently. You thought I was small, I finished. Most people do. He swallowed. The house is safe, I said, as long as respect lives there. He nodded. I won't make that mistake again. I looked at him steadily. You already did, I said. What matters is whether you learn. He left quietly. No argument. No threat. Just the weight of knowing that the woman he dismissed had been standing above him the entire time. That Christmas, I stayed home. Not because I wasn't invited, but because I finally understood something. Belonging doesn't require permission. I cooked for myself. I lit candles. I wore a dress I loved, not expensive, not dramatic, just mine. And as snow fell outside my window, I thought about all the women like me. The quiet ones. The invisible ones. The mothers, maids, cleaners, caretakers. The women who built worlds they were never thanked for. If this story touched you, if you've ever been told you don't belong, that you're just the help, that your worth is invisible, remember this. Power doesn't always knock. Sometimes it cleans the room, learns the system, and waits. And when it finally stands up, it doesn't need to shout. If you're watching this and thinking, this feels familiar. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or quietly sacrificed for others, you are not small. You are not late. And your story isn't over. Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? If this story moved you, like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because some truths are only spoken when women stop whispering. Until next time, stand tall, even when no one's looking.